Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Citizens of the Spark from Thunderworks Games. Citizens of the Spark is a 1 to 5 player tableau building card comboing game. We'll get into it in a second, but first and most importantly, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and we'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. The general idea of Citizens of the Spark is the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to grab this giant stack full of various abilities over here. There's a lot, actually I'm also gonna grab the randomizer cards to show you them, because there are a lot of cards to go through over here. Because these are the abilities you're going to be combining and mixing up to generate the game you're playing in, and the different cards you're going to be taking is dependent on the player count. So for example, right now we have 8 different abilities pulled in here, from the Diplomat, the Advisor, the Pupil, the Warrior, the Mediator, Performer, the Recruiter, the Scholar, the Scout, the Soldier, the Trader, all of these guys and more, well, not necessarily and more, I guess, all of these various people over here, these are the cards you're going to be mixing into your game. Those are just the randomizers. You're going to grab those cards, you're going to mix them together, you're going to go ahead and generate this gigantic deck, and then you're going to go ahead and give everyone 4 cards, of which they're going to pick 2 as their starting cards. From there, and again, depending on the player count, you're going to go ahead and set out different rows so that players can start drafting these cards into the tableaus, taking these cards, trying to figure out the right combination of abilities that will work for them in the game. The general game sequence is on your turn, you take a look, you say, I have the Mediator and the Advisor, what works well with those? You know what, I want another Advisor. I'm going to take this row, I'm going to go ahead and stack that on top, I'm going to start a Scientist over here, and then we're going to go ahead and take 2 points over here, and add them to the rows that were not picked, while adding new cards. That ensures that as you're playing, whatever is not picked is going to get more and more popular as you go. Now, meanwhile, this player over here sees that the Champion came out. They want to get a bunch of those military symbols into their city, so they'll go ahead and take this over here, and they'll also double up on the Diplomat, so they're getting some more progress over there as well. Now, this is not the full sequence of the game. We'll keep talking you through this, but the general idea is on your turn, you're going to select a row of cards, and then if you want, you can take an action. Actions are going to be on these cards, and then if other players want, if they have those cards as well, they can follow your action. So the sequence is, take cards. If you want, take an action. If others want, going clockwise for the player, others can follow that action. Rinse and repeat until a game end is triggered, which will happen when you can no longer fill the center row, at which point you'll shuffle the discard up, and you'll go ahead and finish out the round, playing whatever cards you need to finish out the round. That gives you pretty much the exact way that you actually play the game, but then the devil is in the details. What's actually happening here? What are you doing? Well, when you take an action, when you activate a card, you're going to be taking cards from these, from the cards you've mixed into your particular deck, the thing that has made your game unique compared to all others, because statistically speaking, you are almost always going to be playing with a very, very different roster of characters or combinations. But what you're doing is you're very often activating an ability on the card equal to the strength of the number of cards that you have in order to in some way get points. That's the core idea of it. But the way the cards interweave, that's going to define your unique puzzle as you figure out the most efficient way to gather points in the game. So just to walk through some basics over here, let's take a look at the cards on the table. So for example, we have the Bandit over here. The Bandit, this action over here, you're going to take from each opponent whose city has more than you. Now the way this works over here is this little fire illustrates that it's an attack action. Some various cards are going to have various defensive abilities. I'm going to grab my randomizer deck so I don't have to go through things. But whenever you see a shield here, that illustrates a defensive ability. Those are going to be reactions when someone does an attack action against you. So this Bandit, they have a little symbol here, take X from each opponent whose city has more of those little symbols than you. Now, X is always defined by whatever's going on down here. In this case, the more of these cards that you have, if you have 1 card when you activate this, then you activate the Bandit. Let's put it in our area over here. Let's pretend we're activating the Bandit. If we were to activate the Bandit right now, we would go ahead and look around the board, and we'd see this city over here has 2 of these symbols. Our city has 3, so if we activate the Bandit right now, it won't do anything to this player, but maybe there's another player across the table over there, and when we activate this, we're going to go ahead and look, and we have 1 card, so we're going to get 3 points from each opponent whose city has more than us. So 1 player across the table, let's pretend they have 5 of these symbols. We're going to go ahead and do that. We'll discard this. This will get discarded now because you always discard the top card when you activate a stack. That's part of the puzzle of choosing when to activate. Because if you had a bunch of bandits, if you had a bunch of bandits in the game, a stack of bandits, let's go ahead and find a few over here to go through. Let's grab a bandit over here. So if we had another bandit and even another bandit, if we take this 3rd bandit and we play it, and we play these bandits right now, when we activate the stack, we're going to get the strongest ability. We're going to take 5 points from each opponent, but then more importantly, you only discard the top card, leaving this able to activate again either on a future turn as is, or possibly gathering more bandits, continuously activating that level 3 power. So you're constantly trying to figure out the puzzle of when to activate abilities, when to wait until you have all 3 cards, and trying to figure out the right puzzle here because the game will end before you know it, and having a whole bunch of cards in front of you is often not necessarily the best way to score points, although it can be, it depends on the cards themselves. And so that's the core puzzle of here. Each card has an ability. You're trying to get usually 3 of those in front of you to be able to maximize those abilities as you trade them in. And the way you're doing that is choosing to activate that single action as you go. Now in general, for the most part, I covered what is going on here. You're activating a single action. There are some small differences. So for example, this is going to be an attack action. This is going to be simply be an action that's going to give you points, gain points in one neighbor city. So you're looking over here to see the military symbols in another neighbor city, and then gaining 1, 2, or 3 points per military symbol as you gather these cards. So having, like right now, this player over here, gathering this champion over here, and gathering this advisor, and then choosing to activate this champion, they look at this city, and they get 2 points per symbol for 4 points total, and then discard this card. Now those cards are coming from the bank, they're not coming from another player because it's not an attack action in the game. So you're going to have basic actions over here. You have attack actions. Then over here we have the advisor, which we covered briefly over here. The advisor is going to have a defensive action. So when you are attacked, you gain 2 points. This is not relevant to the strength of the advisor. This is simply whether you have 1, 2, 3, 7, you'll simply gain 2 points. And then at the end of the game, you gain X points, where X is equal to 1, 2, or 3. So if you manage to maintain 3 advisors the whole game, you're going to get 20 points for your advisors, which is a nice chunk of points. That's basically how you play through Citizens of the Spark. You're going to be going ahead and gathering cards into your tableau. Every round you activate one action. Players have the ability to follow that action, the exact action. So if they have the same card that you have, they can go ahead and activate it in turn. You go round around the table until the main deck eventually runs out of cards. You'll reshuffle it until you can finish so that each player has an even number of turns. You'll see who has the most points, and that's who wins Citizens of the Spark. Which brings us to review, starting off with ease of play. For the most part, this game is fairly straightforward in the actual rules. Nothing overly complicated here. Rulebook is pretty clear. I have not dipped into the solo mode, so I can't talk about that. I'd say most of my games, the box says 45 to 90 minutes. Nope, I lied. I thought the box said 45 to 90 minutes. The box says 45 to 60 minutes, which is actually more accurate. They're actually accurate there. I was going to say that I thought the box said 45 to 90, and I've rarely had a game go over an hour, and that's actually accurate over here. So the game usually runs around 45 to 60 minutes, and table space is ultimately going to come down to the number of players. Like I said already, 1 to 5 player game, each player having their own tableau of characters in front of them. Overall, an easy enough game to table and play. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is in general, first of all, the art. I love the art and the way they have this art fading into the white background. It looks beautiful, the art in general, and the graphic design of it is overall very, very pleasing and satisfying. But most importantly for me, this is a game of powers and abilities. This is a game of gathering powers and abilities and trying to figure out the right combination of powers and abilities. If you like games that give you an overwhelming number of cards, then it's up to you to figure out how to make that as efficient as possible, to get the most out of those powers, to get the most out of the combinations of things. That's what this game is offering you. But because of these sheer stacks of cards in front of you over here, and I have no idea what their plans are for expansions or crowdfunding content or any of that, but because of all that going on, you have a ton of variety to the experience as well. It's not just about trying to puzzle your way through the powers and abilities to find your right combination of things. It's about the fact that the next time you play this game, it's going to be a different combination of what's most efficient for that game. It's going to be a different puzzle of how can I get these for me in the game, but it's not just about the puzzle of trying to see the patterns. It's about the puzzle of watching what other players are doing, how they're building out their board, and then going ahead and taking those cards yourself that react best to the current game state, not just the combination of cards in play, but the game state determined by the players as they play things. The follow mechanic keeps people on their toes, knowing that as you take an action, you might be giving somebody else an extra action for free. That introduces an additional puzzle as well as trying to figure out what the most efficient thing to activate at any given time is. And the game does all of this in 45 to 60 minutes. It is a fast, punchy game that gives you high variability, a big puzzle of trying to optimize around which card combinations are going to work for you the most, and just gives it to you all in a very tight, efficient package. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, I'll say that as a small little nitpick over here. I find this little graphic design thing a little not intuitive as it goes. This over here, there's the little icon here, gain X in any one city. I almost wish they had just said X, but the problem is they do it based on the levels of 1, 2, or 3. I haven't played a single game of this where that wasn't hard for a new player to kind of pick up on. Something about the way the card is structured. I think overall the art's great, the graphic design is great. Something about that symbol I don't find to be intuitive to teaching people. It is not the hardest thing to get past, but it's a small little nitpick there. I'll say more importantly, certain card combinations do have what I'd call stupid back and forths. And it's hard to go into without finding the exact card combinations. Well, certain cards will have things like, oh, I steal a card from you, and then you follow and steal it back. And you could have little tit-for-tat little reactions that are not necessarily as satisfying as trying to figure out your combinations and puzzle. It is limited to certain cards in the game, but certain cards just aren't a satisfying experience. I'll say as well, in a similar note, certain combinations of cards, when you go ahead and build together a deck, just won't necessarily flow together nicely. Meaning, as much as I love the variability of the game state, And as much as the game does give you recommended combinations, so if you look at the back of the rulebook, part of what it's going to give you is here are certain card combinations. It's a little bit more take that. This is a little bit more economical. This is a little more defensive. You could have certain card combinations that are well optimized to play together, and you can, of course, build your own. For me, I like mixing together things randomly, which means most of the time that I've played this, I've gotten like a new puzzle to figure out each time, and then sometimes when you play it, you're like, well, that didn't flow together. This one needed more merchant symbols. There are no more merchant symbols. This guy looks at, if you have a champion in the game, and the only thing that has military symbols is the champion, then you're basically relying on other people taking champions in order for the champion to have any effect, which is not the worst, but it's also not the most satisfying. So you want to be mindful as you build a deck that as much as randomly generating things is fun, not every randomly generated deck experience is going to work well for you. As far as what I can see others not liking, this game does have take that elements. This game definitely has a degree of take that in the game, where you're doing something that will hurt your opponent. Yes, you can build up defensive stuff, but nonetheless you can be pinged in this game. Usually it's going to be used to try to take down who you think is winning, but part of the problem is it's not always obvious who's winning, who has a good engine in play, who has points, who has endgame points. So the take that mechanic is present in the game. It's just something you have to be okay with as you play. As far as final thoughts on Citizens of the Spark, I first found out about this game, I want to say actually, I don't know how long ago. At least early 2024, maybe even early, I don't know. But I first saw this game for Thunderworks Games, and the art pulled me in from the get-go. But then more importantly, the description of the game, of having all these decks of cards, and you mix together the combinations that are going to determine how your game is, that's exactly the kind of game engine I enjoy. I like it when a game has an engine, and you have to learn that engine, but then you have to adapt to whatever differences or variabilities are going to be in play, because that introduces an evolving puzzle, and Citizens Spark very much has that. To me, this is a satisfying game with a little bit of tableau building, a little bit of a economy of your actions of trying to figure out when to activate things, when to hold them, when to build them up. And then the core thing that makes this game satisfying for me is the powers and abilities, and then the variedness of those powers and abilities, of the way you're constantly trying to solve for new combinations of cards every single time you play. This is a very satisfying game. To me, it's a 4 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, I'm going to start with Dominion, which is the obvious one to me. This very much has elements of Dominion, elements of gathering together groups of cards and then trying to figure out your pathway forward. To a little extent, it's going to be similar to any deck building game, especially with a fixed card market, but Dominion is definitely the game that most comes to mind. And if you're looking for an oldie and a goodie that this kind of feels reminiscent of, is Guildhall from AEG. Not a game that's the most popular, but if you ever had a chance to play Guildhall, this definitely has elements of Guildhall to it. If you enjoyed that one, it's worth taking a look at this, and if you do find yourself getting this, it might be worth trying to hunt down a copy of Guildhall and see if it's a game that you enjoy. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.